The Jedi and Sith are not rival governments or competing cultures. They are opposing interpretations of the same cosmic energy, each defined by rejecting what the other embraces. Jedi identity is built on restraint, discipline, and selflessness, while Sith identity is rooted in autonomy, passion, and the pursuit of personal power. Their philosophies do not intersect because they are constructed in direct opposition. Coexistence would require both to compromise the very principles that make them what they are. The tension begins with how each side interprets emotion. The Sith rely on passion as fuel, believing emotion produces strength. The Jedi believe emotion must be controlled to prevent corruption. In a shared society, each would view the other's approach as inherently dangerous. What one side interprets as natural human experience, the other sees as the first step toward collapse. That ideological divide makes cooperation unstable on a fundamental level. The Jedi enforce limitations to prevent imbalance. Their system depends on rules designed to restrict attachment, ambition, and dominance. The Sith see these rules as chains that limit potential. In a shared environment, the Jedi would attempt to impose regulatory structures to maintain order, while the Sith would reject those structures on principle. The result is not philosophical disagreement. It is immediate structural conflict between two incompatible value systems. Each group functions like a belief order, with its own rituals, doctrines, and moral priorities. This makes their conflicts less like a political disagreement and more like competing religions with mutually exclusive truths. The Jedi view power as a responsibility, while the Sith view power as a right. Any attempt at peaceful coexistence would be fragile, because the systems they operate under cannot interpret power the same way. A shared space would collapse under the weight of ideological contradiction. Their moral languages also diverge. A Jedi interprets mercy as discipline, a refusal to allow anger or vengeance to dictate action. A Sith interprets that same act as weakness that invites exploitation. Conversely, a Sith's decisive elimination of a threat registers to them as clarity, while a Jedi sees it as moral failure. These opposing frameworks create a perpetual cycle where every action by one order is interpreted as a provocation by the other. No stable foundation for mutual understanding exists. The nature of the Force itself reinforces the divide. The light and dark sides do not coexist peacefully. They react to one another. Whenever one grows dominant, the other emerges to counterbalance it. This dynamic ensures that any long-term equilibrium is temporary. Even if peace were achieved for a generation, the Force's own mechanics would push events toward imbalance. The result is not intentional hostility. It is cosmic correction, built into the universe. Historical evidence throughout the galaxy reinforces this pattern. Every period of stability ends when one side gains influence and the other responds to maintain its own survival. The High Republic flourished until dark side forces rose in response. The Old Republic endured periods of peace until Sith resurgence disrupted them. Each cycle revealed the same conclusion. Coexistence always devolves into conflict when one side perceives imbalance in the Force or society. Attempts at coexistence inevitably collapse because each order defines justice through a different lens. Jedi justice prioritizes harmony and the mitigation of suffering. Sith justice prioritizes autonomy and the assertion of will. No shared legal or ethical system could satisfy both interpretations. Even a neutral governing body would fail, because each side would resist any rule that contradicted its core beliefs. Structural incompatibility prevents long-term stability. The Jedi believe that fulfilling their duty requires suppressing temptation. The Sith believe fulfilling theirs requires embracing it. These opposing relationships to the same internal forces create friction not just in politics or combat, but in the daily choices that shape society. A Sith climbing in influence would view ambition as natural. A Jedi would interpret that same rise as a threat. Each would respond according to their philosophy, and conflict would follow. Even ideological compromise is impossible. If the Jedi abandoned restraint, they would cease to be Jedi. If the Sith abandoned passion, they would cease to be Sith. Their identities rely on preserving a worldview the other cannot accept. The moment either group altered its philosophy to accommodate coexistence, it would lose its defining purpose. Coexistence requires transformation, that neither side can or will undertake. Recruitment further destabilizes coexistence. The Sith view potential as an opportunity to strengthen their order. The Jedi view the same potential as something requiring guidance and discipline. In a shared environment, both would attempt to shape force-sensitive individuals according to their beliefs. This would create a constant struggle for influence that would escalate from ideological competition to open conflict. Even hypothetical coexistence collapses under scrutiny, because both sides interpret imbalance as a call to action. The Sith see dominance as necessity. The Jedi see it as corruption. Both respond when the other gains power. This reflex is built into their traditions, training, and worldview. They cannot tolerate imbalance, and they cannot agree on what balance means. Their definitions of stability ensure perpetual conflict. The galaxy continues to cycle through eras of Jedi prominence and Sith resurgence because the Force responds to extremes. Coexistence would require both sides to maintain equilibrium, but equilibrium contradicts their natures. As long as one thrives on freedom and the other on discipline, ideological peace remains unattainable. They do not merely disagree, they negate each other. Coexistence is not impossible because of hatred. It is impossible because their foundational identities eliminate the conditions required for shared existence. The Jedi and Sith cannot live amongst each other because their philosophies cannot. Their beliefs conflict at every structural level: moral, emotional, political, cosmic. They do not fail to coexist because of rivalry. They fail because coexistence violates what both sides fundamentally are. The theoretical divide between Jedi and Sith becomes even clearer when the focus shifts from ideology to human behavior. People do not interact based on abstract philosophy alone. They act on fear, ambition, trust, and vulnerability. Even if both orders attempted coexistence, human nature would destabilize the arrangement long before doctrine did. Peace is not achieved in principle. It must survive in action, and action is where coexistence collapses. Shared power structures invite conflict. The Sith interpret power as something earned through strength, while the Jedi interpret power as something entrusted through responsibility. In any shared environment, promotion, leadership, or authority becomes a battleground. The Sith would challenge any restriction, viewing it as oppression, while the Jedi would challenge any excess, viewing it as danger. Human ambition and human caution would collide at every level of hierarchy. History repeatedly shows how fragile trust becomes when opposing worldviews share space. The Old Republic's attempts at treaties were not failures of diplomacy, but failures of psychology. The Sith entered negotiations to exploit weakness. The Jedi entered them to preserve peace. Each assumed the other's intentions were dishonest because they would have been dishonest in the same position. A shared table built on mutual suspicion cannot endure. Fear accelerates breakdown. Jedi fear loss of control because they believe it leads to suffering. Sith fear limitation because they believe it leads to weakness. In coexistence, every action by one group triggers the fear response of the other. A Sith expanding influence would feel natural to them, but threatening to the Jedi. A Jedi intervention would feel protective to them, but oppressive to the Sith. Fear creates a chain reaction long before violence ever does. Compassion becomes a liability for the Jedi in mixed societies. Their commitment to redemption, mercy, and forgiveness leaves openings the Sith can exploit. A Sith seeking influence could manipulate sympathy, appear reformed, or use vulnerability to gain access. The Jedi's strength becomes the very mechanism that endangers them. Peace that requires blindness to manipulation is not peace. It is prelude to collapse. The Sith's approach to relationships ensures instability. Sith view alliances as tools, not commitments. They cooperate only when cooperation benefits them. In a shared society, this creates asymmetrical trust. The Jedi assume sincerity where the Sith assume advantage. One group invests emotionally, the other invests strategically. The mismatch guarantees eventual betrayal, not by ideology, but by predictable human behavior. Ambition magnifies the divide. Sith encourage ambition as a virtue, while Jedi treat ambition as a threat. In a shared space, a rising Sith is seen by Jedi as evidence of corruption, while a rising Jedi is seen by Sith as evidence of suppression. Human advancement becomes symbolic conflict. Every promotion escalates tension. Every influence shift becomes a warning sign. Ordinary social mobility destabilizes coexistence because each side interprets success differently. Government collapses under mixed interpretation of control. If a Sith gains political authority, the Jedi will intervene. If a Jedi gains political authority, the Sith will resist. Neither group can tolerate the other shaping the laws of society. Even if both stood down temporarily, distrust ensures that both remain prepared for conflict. A society where both sides are waiting for betrayal cannot maintain order. Personal conflict amplifies political conflict. Individual grudges, mistrust, or fear between specific Jedi and Sith can become catalysts for larger war. A single confrontation, disagreement, or threat can ignite the larger ideological divide. Coexistence requires emotional stability, but emotional stability cannot be guaranteed across two groups trained to interpret feelings differently. One misunderstanding becomes a spark in a powder keg. Generational transfer makes coexistence impossible. Children trained by Jedi inherit the belief that the dark side must be controlled. Children trained by Sith inherit the belief that control is oppression. Even if one generation maintained peace, the next would break it. A shared society cannot survive when each order teaches the next generation that the other is inherently wrong. Peace cannot outlast incompatible education. Neutrality becomes unsustainable. Force-sensitive individuals would be pressured to choose sides, not by ideology but by survival. A person who demonstrates power becomes a potential asset to one group and a threat to the other. Their choices, friendships, and loyalties would become terrain in a silent war. Human relationships collapse under the weight of that pressure, long before ideology does. Even hypothetical coexistence relies on suppressing instincts neither side can suppress. Sith cannot stop seeking greater freedom and influence. Jedi cannot stop preventing potential harm. Both behaviors are natural expressions of their training. Asking Sith to limit ambition or Jedi to ignore imbalance is asking them to stop being who they are. The attempt to coexist becomes an attempt to unteach identity. No society can endure with that requirement built into its foundation. Conflict becomes inevitable because the force-sensitive population itself becomes unstable when divided. Each action by one order shifts the force's balance, sharpening emotions, fears, ambitions, and instincts. This creates feedback loops where human behavior reinforces cosmic imbalance. The Jedi react to danger. The Sith react to limitation. Each reaction generates new instability. Coexistence fails not because people choose conflict, but because the environment rewards it. The Jedi and Sith cannot coexist because human nature magnifies their differences until stability becomes impossible. Fear fuels conflict. Ambition fuels competition. Mistrust fuels escalation. Even without ideology, their psychology pulls them apart. Coexistence collapses not from philosophy, but from the predictable human reactions that philosophy amplifies. Peace fails because people behave like people, and the orders they belong to shape that behavior in incompatible ways.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.